Boo. Hey, everybody. Happy Halloween for those of you that celebrate that. I'm Nelson Coulter, and I've got the great honor of being the lead learner on your journey over this 7-week term in ED 720 curriculum course. First, let's see, Charlotte, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Very good, thank you. Welcome all. What I'd like for you to know is, and you can take comfort in this perhaps, is I'm not going to lecture to you tonight. That's not the way I conduct my Zoom sessions. Generally, what you can expect out of me during these things is a few comments that come to mind as I read through your responses in your learning task submissions and your discussion forum, and perhaps in relation to the content, but I'm not going to be delivering content to you during these Zoom sessions. What I like for them to be is for me to make a few comments to you, and then for us to have some intellectual exchange if you care to, and then finally have some Q&A, give you the opportunity to ask me questions if you want to at the end of the process. Some of you have already probably been creeping my website and trying to figure out who the bald-headed guy is that looks like a retired drill sergeant. Those of you that haven't, my website is www.nelsonwcoulter.com. Every week I will make a few book recommendations for you, books that come to mind that I think might be relevant to the topic that we're discussing for that particular week or evening. And on my website, you can find one of the links there that actually has book recommendations of books that I've read over the years that I think would be helpful and meaningful to other people, because they certainly shape the way I think, and not just on the topic of education, but some of my favorite topics happen to be about leadership and health and stewardship of resources and other organizational behavior, other kinds of things like that. In fiction, I've got some fiction recommendations for you there as well. But you're welcome to, and I blog, usually 2 or 3 times a week. A thought will cross my mind that I find that I deem worthy of sharing with others. Mostly I just got to get it out of my brain so something else to start growing in there. There's 65 of us in this class together. We're tethered together for 7 weeks. There was 66 of us, but we lost one already. And you all come from all kinds of places. Most of you are from Louisiana, which is understandable. We've got students from New Jersey, from Florida, Pennsylvania, Virginia, American Samoa, Virgin Islands, South Korea. Got a student from South Korea, and then a few from my home state of Texas. I, like most of you, do not live in Shreveport. Someone has your microphone on. If you will mute that, it will help. If one of you can knows who that is, if you type it into the chat box, let them know.
Hold up. I don't know how to turn it off.
There's a button down on the bottom left of your screen. Is that Charlotte? There you go. Thank you. So, and there's some of you in the class from Texas, and I, like most of you, do not live in Shreveport. Actually, I'm beaming to you from my ranch in West Texas, out near Lubbock, Texas. I'm only about 1,000 miles from Shreveport, and that's where I'll come to you most weeks, although I do kind of range around the country on different kinds of assignments. Sometimes I'm just running from the FBI. But the course, when Dr. Russ Perry asked me to teach this course a year ago, he asked me if I could build it in sort of an ambidextrous way. so that it would serve students. Some of you are in the Leadership MEDL program, and some of you are working on your master's degree in the curriculum instruction program, and Dr. Perry is the director of both of those. But he asked if I could build the course in such a way that I thought it might be meaningful to both groups, and I think I have. Always, regardless of what kind of course I'm teaching, and even when I'm teaching people in teacher prep programs, I try to teach you through the eyes of leadership, because in my experience, teachers are quite often some of the earliest and most impactful leaders that students have in their lives. In fact, I'm one of those. I would not be with you tonight were it not for teachers and coaches and counselors and principals of the public school that I attended, because I'm a first-generation degree earner in my family. So those professional educators had a powerful influence on my life and helped me see possibilities for myself that I certainly was not able to see without their assistance. Oh, your feedback, your Google response forms, most of you have already stuck your nose in those, and you can see that in some of those prompts, some of the students, some of you have the opportunity to ping against the ELCC standards, which are the standards for those of you in the leadership program. And then those of you in the MEDCI program have opportunity to ping against the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards, because you, at this point, at least in your career, have not indicated that you're headed into administrative kind of work. Let's talk a little bit about the formatting of the course. What you see in week 1, which is learning task 1, 2, and 3, at the top in week 1, every week is going to look just like that. Learning task 1, learning task 2, learning task 3 are always going to be me feeding you some content of some kind. I try to mix up the formatting. Sometimes it'll be in document form, sometimes it'll be in video form, sometimes it'll be in form of a PowerPoint, sometimes it'll be in a podcast form. But those first 3 learning tasks each week will always be content that I'm delivering to you. Some of that content has been developed by highly respected thought leaders in our field, but some of that content has been produced by just fellow grunts in the salt mines of education like you and I, that go to work every day and try to cause learning to happen for either a group of 4-year-olds or sometimes 14-year-olds. And like in my case, we'll probably, I don't know all of your ages, but it's not uncommon at all for me to have someone in these classes that's over 50 years old. So it's a wide range of learners, but who cares? Our job is to cause learning to happen. You'll find in your Moodle module and under the learning enhancements, you saw how that's constructed. Each week, the learning enhancements are at the top of the module. And those are the items that I've crafted for you that I think will aid and abet your learning. That's not the stuff that you're getting graded on. It's just the things that I think you'll find helpful. And then the learning tasks are the second portion of each weekly module. And those are the assignments for which you are to provide answers. Someone still has the mic on. If you look, try to mute. The button you'll find is at the very bottom left of your screen there. The collective learning, and that's a feature you've all figured out so far. Those of you that have done assignments so far have figured out that I ask you always to give me, you're turning in your work in a Google form, which is a survey type instrument. And what that happens is when you all submit your responses in that Google form, it populates it on my side of the internet in the form of a spreadsheet. And what I do at the end of each week is, after I've read through your stuff and given you a grade on your assignments, I will turn that entire spreadsheet back to you all in the next week's Moodle module under the collective learning title, so that you will be able to see what everyone else in the class submitted in response to those prompts that I gave you. So I advise you, it's not going to hurt my feelings if you take a cheap shot at me in your responses, because I'm an old retired principal and superintendent. You probably can't, and athletic coach, so you probably can't call me any names that I haven't been called before. But if you decide to say something tacky about someone, just know that everyone in the class will be able to see it the following week. At least we're not in the same room and we don't have to worry about physical violence with one another, perhaps. Every week too, well, not every week, there's some of you have already discovered the Sandbox Forum that's showing up in the learning enhancements of week 1. I will drag that Sandbox Forum down each week as we move into the subsequent weeks. And what the Sandbox Forum is a place for you to ask questions and get answers. I'm not the only one that knows the answers, so if you're looking at the Sandbox Forum and someone has posted a question in there and you know the answer to the question, well, answer it for them. I am online a lot, as I mentioned to you earlier. I live at my ranch out in West Texas, and it's an actually working ranch, and I'm the #1 laborer. So quite often you'll hear from me and get responses from me, usually somewhere between 3:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. That's when I do most of my academic work. But I'm constantly monitoring my email and my phone throughout the day. So you can always expect response from me within 24 hours, and usually it's far quicker than that. Occasionally I get hemmed up into some kind of a problem. If I happen to be milking a cow, I can't really just stop doing that to pick up the phone. The Zoom attendance in these Zoom sessions it's optional for you. As far as live attendance, I would like for you to, if you don't attend live, which I understand, some of you have church obligations and work obligations. Some of you, like many teachers, have moonlighting jobs. And most of you have families that you're trying to attend to as well. But I would like, if you cannot attend the Zoom sessions in person, I record those and I will post them in the Moodle module for that particular week. So when we get done tonight, either later tonight or early in the morning, you'll find the recording of this session posted in the learning enhancements for the week 1 module. On your responses on the assignments, what I'd like for you to do, I think you've probably already discovered that I'm not requiring of you a scholarly paper or a research type paper. What I'm trying to do is feed you a wide variety of content on the particular topical areas that we're covering. And then I'm looking for evidence that you have critically engaged with that content. Always, I want you to be in the practice of using professional language and customary writing, conventional writing techniques. Again, it goes back to my feelings about school leadership and our role. If I were still a campus principal and you were applying for a teaching job with me, or if I were still a school superintendent, like I used to be, and you were applying for a job with me at central office, and it didn't matter if it's a professional job like teachers and counselors and assistant principals, or if it were a job like bus driver or custodian, I would be requiring of you a timed writing exercise in the interview process. And that's because I believe strongly that in this day and age, those of us that are working in schools have to, or forced to, communicate with many of our audiences, both our internal audiences and our external audiences, in writing. And when we don't write clearly and professionally and well, it's a distraction. And even if our message is good, if the writing is not effective and in a pretty high quality, then even a quality message gets lost in poor writing. So I'm gonna insist that you write using traditional and conventional writing conventions, and professionally. And then also each week with each learning task, even the ones I'm feeding you, the content I'm feeding you, or in the content that you're digging up on your own in learning tasks 4 and 5, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. I'm going to want you to cite it appropriately using the APA citation methodology. My apologies to those of you that are English teachers. I'm married to one of you. We don't use MLA in the field of education, and usually the hard sciences and the mathematics. We all agree to use the citation methodology called APA, which is the American Psychological Association. And it's easy to find that. If you look in our Moodle system, there at the very top in the welcome module, I've given you a cheat sheet on APA citations. I am not an APA citation purist by any stretch of the imagination, but I will insist on 4 things from you in those citations. Anytime you're citing content, I'm going to want you to tell me the name of the person or the persons, human beings, the human being that created the content, the year that that content was created, the title of that content, and the 4th piece is where that content, where you found it. If you found it online, then you can post the URL. If you found it in hard copy version of a book, then you'll cite the name of the publisher and location of the publisher. If you found it in a journal of some kind, you'll cite the name of the journal. So it's those 4 things always. And I know some of you are going to get really irritated at me in week 1 and 2 because I'm going to tell you, nope, your citation is not quite right. You can try again. On that topic, I almost always give you a chance to try again. I want you to turn your assignments in on time. They're all due on Sunday nights at 11:30. People always ask me, why not midnight? I would love for it to be midnight on Sunday night, but the LSU Shreveport techno geeks shut the system down completely from 11:30 to midnight on Sunday nights. So you couldn't submit anything then, even if you wanted to. So assignments are all due at 11:30 on Sunday nights. It's except on week 7. Week 7, the last week of the term, I'll change that deadline. I'll push it up 1 day to Saturday night because I have quite a lot of grading to do before I have to submit grades bright and early the next week. As far in relation to the grading topic, you can see from the rubrics in our syllabus that every assignment other than your final exam is on a 3-point scale. And that's a knockoff from Dr. Doug Reeves' work out of Harvard University. But all of your assignments are weighted exactly the same except those final exams, and it's always 3 points is the top you get, and it basically runs like this. Your submission was either substantive, which is the 3-point version, or it was adequate, which was generally the 2-point version, or it was minimal, which I deemed to be the 1-point version. And so many people ask me, well, what does that stuff mean? You can look at the wording in the rubric, but basically, I'm looking for evidence that you've critically engaged with the content and that you're articulating what you learned and in a very fluid, efficient, and effective way. If it looks to me like you probably did the assignment on your break, your morning break, it's probably not going to be a substantive response. And if it looks to me like you did the assignment while you were at the stoplight during your commute, it's probably going to get a minimal grade. In the first week or 2, I'll give you feedback on it and give you the chance to redo it if you want to redo it again for improved grade. The content I've already mentioned to you earlier, I'll feed to you in various forms. On the videos, and I'll try to give you videos every week. You may or may not know this, and I apologize if I'm insulting your intelligence, but when you're running a video, if you click down in the bottom right corner of the screen, the little gear thing there in the bottom, you can almost always change the speed of the video and make it run a little bit faster, which is the way I usually watch videos. What we do know from research is that you and I, especially those of us that are educated, our brains think in the vicinity of 700 to 1,000 words per minute. And most public speakers only speak at a rate of about 300 to 400 words per minute. So our brains are running a lot faster than the video speakers are speaking usually. And what you and I can do is speed those videos up while we're watching them and still not lose anything in relation to the content. If you're listening to somebody from the South, kind of like I am, we actually speak a little slower than that. Those of you from New Jersey, my betting money would speak at a little faster clip than I do. Pennsylvania as well. I'll try to give you feedback fairly frequently on your assignments, and you'll get a feel for it as I'm grading those things and turning it back to you. Some of you have already asked me, and it's come up. I know in your other classes you're probably turning your assignments actually into Moodle, and but I've chosen to go through with the collection of your responses in the Google form format. And I've constructed those Google Forms in such a way that you can ask for a receipt. So if it makes you feel better to know that the thing actually landed. But one or two of you have already emailed me and said, I don't know if you got it or not. And if you're not sure, if you're nervous about it, email me. And I'll let you know if I can see your response or not. It's not something we're going to be, I'm not looking for ways to fail you at all. I'd love for every one of you to make an A at the end of this course. For our purposes, let's shift a little bit to the content because you're fixing to dig in, especially learning tasks 4 and 5. For our purposes in this course, you can think of standards and curriculum as being synonymous. One of the authors or speakers that you're going to read is going to insist that those are two completely different things. But for our purposes, you can think of standards and curriculum as synonymous with one another. And that's curriculum really is our attempt, one of our initial attempts at standardization. It's when we come to some common agreement about what it is we want the learners that are in our charge to learn. And those take various formats and stuff, and obviously relative to the different sort of disciplines and topics. It can be much more specific or much more general, depending on what those topics are. But standardization, the impact of standardization, and those of you, particularly those of you working in public schools now, they've been under a standardization assault here for about 25 years now, particularly in relation to high stakes accountability and standardized testing. Here's one of the things that happens when we choose to standardize anything. We choose to standardize in the interest of trying to affect some sort of consistency. In the case of curriculum, we're trying to standardize in the interest of affecting consistency in what we claim we're teaching. And then we can go another step further, and which has happened in many of your environments, is then that attempt at consistency has shifted into the assessment side, which is really not the topic of this course so much. But what the effects of standardization are is the following. Standardization really is an attempt to create a floor, a base, a minimum, that we're not an absolute guaranteed level of this is what we're going to get done. The de facto result of that is we quite often end up with standardization inadvertently, perhaps, creating a ceiling too, because as we get focused on the floor, the minimum, the rock bottom absolute guaranteed, then we spend fewer and fewer resources on the high end. So whenever we attempt to standardize, quite often the result is we get what we achieve or we're attempting to achieve, which is a consistent, guaranteed product. But in the side effect of it is that we have created a ceiling, a limit, an upper limit. For those of you that are mathematicians and have studied the calculus, we created an upper limit for ourselves. And that is not always a good thing. It's not always a good thing for the learners. Quite often, it's the high-end learners that get penalized from that process. Let's talk ever so briefly about Learning Task 4 and Learning Task 5. I promise I'll give you all a chance to ask me questions. In Learning Task 4, I ask you specifically to go look for a particular curriculum at the statewide level. My recommendation to you is when you're looking there, I ask you to look for, I think, seems like in week 1, I ask you to look for first grade English language arts. Is that right? Someone nod at me if my memory is correct. Okay, thank you. I ask you to look for English language arts first grade in 2 different states. One state that starts with A through L or something, I can't remember. So let's say you're looking for, you go to Alabama. My recommendation to you is you look at the Department of Education for the state of Alabama, and you're looking for the standards for ELA first grade. And then you'll go to some state starts with N through Z, let's say Nebraska, and you go to the Department of Education for the state of Nebraska, and you're looking for the ELA first grade standards for that state. And then the rest of that Learning Task 4 is my questions, my prompts to you to get you to do basically a compare and contrast analysis of those 2 different states and the way they're approaching first grade ELA. Learning Task 5 shifts just a little bit. So we jump from state comparisons in Learning Task 4 to specific school district comparisons in Learning Task 5. So what you're looking for in Learning Task 5 then, you would be looking for a school district in a state that starts with A through L. Let's say Connecticut. Certainly. So you're looking for a school district in Connecticut. No, let's use California. I can think of cities there. My recommendation to you when you're looking for particular school districts is most of the large metropolitan school districts now publicly post that kind of information, and it's fairly accessible. So if you were looking for a school district, let's say in California, San Diego would be a great choice. Oakland, I'm sure you can find their content as well. But any city there in that state, when you have a large school district, you can probably pretty easily put your hands on that content. And then on the other side, for the comparison, then you would be looking for a city in a state that begins with N through Z, let's say Texas, and you could go to Houston ISD and try to find the content, that particular content that I asked you to look for, that curriculum. So you can run the 2 comparisons. And so in my example, you might be running a comparison between San Diego, California schools. I think they call those unified school districts, don't they, in California? And then Houston ISD here in Texas. And you can run the comparison between those 2 curricula. I hope that helps explain that a little bit for you. If you got questions, you know how to reach me. Email. I think those of you that have had me in class before, but by the way, thanks for coming back if you had me in class before. I'm like Southwest Airlines. I know you got a lot of choices. I'm glad you chose me. And then for those of you that are new to me, you'll find out quickly that as college professors go, I'm about as responsive as they come. So just if you got a question, just ask me, send me an email and ask me, and I'll get back to you pretty dadgum quickly. Week 1, we are, you're getting kind of an overview of the curriculum concept, sort of a generalized look at it. We'll shift in week 2, we'll shift into a little more specific view and look into the specific types of curriculum that we often encounter in schools. A few of the books, I told you earlier that every week I would I would give you some books that, for those of you that are interested in extending your learning. And I know you're all busy, I know you are, but and I'm sure most of you are taking more than one class right now as well. But some books that came to mind that I have read. By the way, I won't recommend any books to you that I haven't read, and I won't recommend any of the crappy books to you that I've read. But the only some books that came to my mind while I was going through this week's stuff and taking a look at your responses so far. A very interesting book that I read actually back when I was in the same place you are, working on my master's degree, was a book by Boomer and a few other authors. Boomer was the lead author, and the title of the book was called "Negotiating the Curriculum: Education for the 21st Century." That book greatly impacted my thinking in relation to the role that you and I play on the ground in the classroom with our students in building and making sense out of curriculum. Excuse me. Another book that came to mind was Leaders of Learning: How District, School, and Classroom Leaders Improve Student Achievement. That was written by two of my favorite authors, Rick Dufour and Robert Marzano. They wrote that in 2011. Marzano, I mentioned, is one of my absolute favorite authors. He's been very active for about 20 years now. Quite a prolific researcher and writer. And one of his most recent books that I read that I think is relevant to our work, your work and mine in this course, was called Becoming a High Reliability School: The Next Step in School Reform. Dr. Marzano wrote that book in 2013. It's one of the best books I've read in the last few years. And then another book that really impacted my thinking significantly. One of the school districts that I served as a school superintendent, we developed our own online school. It was a public school in Texas, but we created our own virtual school as well. And this book I'm mentioning to you now was very influential in my thinking as we were building that in virtual school out. And it was titled Inevitable: Mass Customized Learning by Schwann and McGarvey. They wrote that book in 2012. Those folks are associated with the Gallup organization. Okay. Now, I see one question mark over there in the chat box, and if you got some more, I'll be glad to address those. And let me see here. Jamie, when will this be Jamie, I will, if I don't get this thing uploaded into the Moodle module tonight, it'll probably be before you get up in the morning. Usually I do it very early, like 5:30 a.m. morning after the class, because as soon as I get through having class with you all, I'm going to go sit in my big chair with my lovely bride of 42 years and have a glass of wine. Let's see, other questions. Tonight, Melissa responded. Thank you, Margie. It's glad to have you back. And I'm flattered if you found something informative from all my blathering. Zaina, that's a good question. Do citations include in-text citations? You know, I'm not too persnickety about that, because every assignment I ask you to give me the citation, the correct AP citation in one of the very first prompts in your Google form. So I don't have any high level of anxiety if I don't see the in-text citation. It's pretty good practice for you to do that, especially for those of you that will end up going on to pursue a doctorate. And out of a class of 65 of you, I'm certain that 10 of you will probably be headed toward a doctorate at some point in time or another. So it's good practice to cite correctly always, because I can assure you your dissertation committee will be anal about it. Let's see, you mentioned APA citations in the Google form. Do you want us to put it in at the end? No, in the Google form, I almost ask, it's always probably the first prompt after your name, I think. I ask you to tell me the exact citation. And that reminds me too, some of the things I give you, like if I give you a document as its content, most of the time those documents, it's crystal clear who the author is, what year it was created, the title of the document, and where you got it or where it was published. Some of the stuff is not going to be so easy. Some of the videos and maybe some of the PowerPoint things that I share with you, you might have to hunt and dig and scratch a little bit to find. And I welcome you all to collaborate with one another. If one of you can figure out the appropriate citation, you want to share it with others, that's fine with me. One of the most powerful books I've ever read, I won't tell you the name of it because it would probably scare you about my mental state, but the author makes the assertion that he believed that individual intelligence does not exist, that intelligence is always a social construct. I had never encountered that thought before, but the more I've thought about it over the years, I think he may be right. Saying that, if there's a direct quote, it's always a good idea. Yes, it's always a good idea to tell us who you're quoting. Absolutely. In addition to the first question, if a response to a question, I cite a source, should I include a citation at the end of the response? It's not necessary to double cite. It's not important. The thing about citations, and one of the reasons that I've crafted the response mechanisms the way that I have and the assignments that I do, is I don't want to worry about plagiarism, and I don't much have to, because almost everything I ask you, I'm asking, what did you learn? What do you think? And so, if I were asking you to write a scholarly paper, then I'd have to worry about, where you were finding this information, use all those technological tools to see if I could sniff out plagiarism. And so I've crafted it in a way that I really don't think, not at first, I don't think there's really much need on your part to try to go hunt somebody else's thinking when I specifically ask you what you're thinking and what you've learned. No, but you don't have to double cite. But anytime you're quoting someone directly, it's a good idea to let us know who it is you're quoting. Other questions if you got them. And you can ask me orally out loud if you want to. You don't have to write it. Generally, I catch it better the first time when I see it in writing. Okay, Marissa, for learning tasks 4 and 5, aren't district standards the same as state? Actually, Marissa, they are not always the same. And that's one of the reasons I drag you through that, is so that you'll see what has happened. And this has also been one of the the effects, I guess, of the standardization movement. And some of you work in states where the Common Core state standards is the rule of law. Interestingly, here in the state of Texas, our state legislature went on record and passed a law that forbids any school district in Texas to use the Common Core state standards. It's because we don't want, I guess we don't want all that influence of the rest of you in the nation impacting what our children are learning. I don't know. But so Marissa, no, you're going to find as you dig around in Learning Task 4 and Learning Task 5, one of the things I think you're going to learn is what usually happens is this. The state standards are almost always put together by this blue ribbon panel of experts. Well, believe it or not, a blue ribbon panel of mathematics experts are almost always going to think you need to learn a hell of a lot more about mathematics than you really need to know. And so the state standards they just turn into this huge monster. And what most school districts that have the resources and the people do when they're trying to winnow down the state standards is they'll start skinnying those states. They take that huge, big, massive state standards, and the language that you'll encounter, and some of you are probably already encountering now, is a common phraseology for it is power standards. is what school districts start looking at what they call power standards. And what is a power standard? Well, it's the thing that's going to appear on the test. And so school districts start trying to thin out the state standards and reduce them to a manageable task for people like yourselves that are actually teaching third graders or seventh graders or sophomore. Well, can't teach sophomores anything, so forget that. 11th graders. And so, school districts almost always try to skinny down or reduce the number and volume of the state standards into a curriculum that they think their teachers actually stand some reasonable chance of teaching in a typical school year. Good question, though. Good question. I think that learning tasks 4 and 5, unless I miss my guess, I think you all are probably going to, by the end of 7 weeks, you're going to find that it's probably one of the most meaningful things that you did in the course, even more so than just the content that I've been feeding. In my content that I feed you, you'll be introduced to some ideas probably that you haven't seen or thought of before. I know you'll be introduced to some vocabulary that you haven't seen. But when you start running a compare and contrast on those state standards and a compare and contrast on those district standards, you're gonna learn some interesting stuff. And so many of you are in the CNI program, and many of you in the premonition, well, in the discussion forum that I pitched at you on your big getting and premonitions. Many of you have already articulated that you want to be curriculum specialists or instructional coaches. So if you actually realize your dreams in that regard, you're going to be neck deep on trying to make sense of the state standards and figure out a way to skinny them down so that the teachers can be successful in the classroom. Other questions if you got them? I can't, not all, some of you have your cameras off, some on. Sometimes I have, well, there's Musica again. Hi, Musica. Some of you have your cameras off, some on. Sometimes I have some of my students are actually attending church while they're having class, and some of them are walking around the track or going through the McDonald's drive-in. I don't recommend that. But let's see, other questions if you got them. Let's see. Zaina, thank you very much. Yeah, one of the unique idiosyncrasies of the Google Forms is that it's not going to let you use italics, and so don't worry about that. Here's the things I'm still looking for: the big 4, the human being that created the content, the year that content was created, the title of that content, and the publisher or the location where other learners like you and me or your classmates can go find that content if we want to examine it as well. Those are the big 4. And if you look in that APA cheat sheet that I gave you in our Moodle module, you can buy the APA manual if you want to, and you read it. I mean, I was required to do that when I was working on my doctorate. Remarkably uninteresting reading. But really, those are the big 4 things. To appropriately give the people credit that created the content and to lead other learners successfully to that content. That's what those 4 items of information are about. And Zaina, you ask me all the questions you want to. I'm the poster child for asking questions that everybody else is afraid to ask. Don't ever worry about asking me questions, either in this setting or otherwise. Okay. Either you're running out of gas or you're getting tired looking at me. I got my hair fixed for you tonight. All righty. Well, I greatly appreciate you all being here. And honestly, you're never going to bother me by asking me a question. Email me. I'll get back to you quickly if you have questions. or post your questions in the Sandbox forum. We got 65 smart people working here together on this process this term. So surely somebody knows the answer to your question. And also, I said this to you earlier, but I can't just say it enough. Because you can see me, you can tell how old I am, and my shelf life is getting pretty short. Certainly my relevance to your work is diminishing rather quickly the longer I'm out of the field. But it is just such a great honor that you're allowing me to join you in this journey. So I promise you I'll be learning more than you do in the process. But best case scenario is we learn together. I hope you all have a great evening. I will see you next week. And if you need me, use me. Good night.